It's Michael Popok, Legal AF. Did Donald Trump threaten to execute a person in the White House who leaked that he had gone to the bunker during Black Lives Matter protests and George Floyd movement protests because he was embarrassed by it? Did he threaten to execute a member of his White House team if he found the leaker? How realistic is that? What's the corroborating evidence we have that that occurred? I'm going to break it all down here on this hot take, along with a look at the federal death penalty that accelerated considerably, astronomically, under Donald Trump, just to show you that this guy is a merchant of death and understands what he's talking about when he says he wants to execute people. He's got the tools at his command, especially if it's led by his hand-picked attorney general. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Elisa Farah Griffith, who used to be in Donald Trump's communications department when he was in the White House. She left after Jan 6th. In fact, she was the communications director. Recently, on a podcast interview, she said in no uncertain terms that when Donald Trump was embarrassed by the fact that it had leaked out that he had gone to a secret bunker in the White House during the Black Lives Matter movement, the coward that he is, rather than standing up for civil rights, he went into a bunker. When that came out and made him look bad, he threatened to execute the leaker. She said it on a podcast. In fact, I'm going to play you the clip now. Let's run the clip.
How do you explain that there are people that are very smart, Nikki Haley and Bill Barr are very smart people, that watched the first Trump term on the inside, have described it as very dangerous, but are still saying, well, we might vote for him in 2024?
It's power. I think it's power is just one of the most enticing things that we, have in society. I mean, Caitlin Collins, to her credit, CNN interviewed Bill Barr and asked about an anecdote that I had shared about a meeting he and I were both in the Oval Office, where Trump straight up said a staffer who leaked a story should be executed. And Bill Barr kind of danced, said, I don't recall that specific instance, but there were others where he talked about executing people. And I'm like, how you rationalize that is a person fit in sound judgment to be president of the United States. But I think they're reading the tea leaves. They know there's a very real chance he's going to be president again. And there's not a lot of glory or victory in being right, but being on the wrong side of Trump. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. I really wanted to root for Nikki Haley. I think it was pathetic that she turned around and endorsed him. I think she knows better. I wish that there were more people out there, but I do think it's notable. I mentioned Pence, but every living former standard bearer for the GOP, so everyone who's been on a GOP presidential ticket, with the exception of Sarah Palin, is not backing Donald Trump. Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan, Dan Quayle, presumably George Bush, Mike Pence, everyone that we entrusted who'd risen to the level of seriousness that they could see themselves in the Oval says, oh, no, this guy should not be in the Oval.
I always like to have at least two sources. And in the article that was written by The Guardian, kind of collecting these pieces, they found the second source. In April, CNN, Bill Barr, who was then the Attorney General, told a very similar story, corroborating what Elisa Farah just said, that Donald Trump was embarrassed by the bunker story, the way it made him look in terms of cowardice, because he's supposed to be the moral leader of our country and of democracy. And he said it would not, even though he didn't have direct details of it, he wouldn't put it past him, Donald Trump, in making that threat. He wouldn't reject it or deny it. That's Bill Barr. Let's run that clip.
I hear from a lot of Republicans who defend Trump saying, well, that's a hypothetical and that's ridiculous. But Elisa Farah Griffin, who was Trump's communications director, posted yesterday and said that you were present at a moment when Trump suggested executing the person who leaked information that he went to the White House bunker when those George Floyd protests were happening outside the White House. Do you remember that?
I remember him being very mad about that. I actually don't remember him saying executing, but I wouldn't dispute it. I mean, it doesn't sound. The president would lose his temper and say things like that. I doubt he would have actually carried it out.
But he would say that on other occasions. You said the
president had I think people sometimes took him too literally, and he would say things like similar to that in occasions to blow off steam. But I wouldn't take him literally every time he did it.
Why not?
because at the end of the day, it wouldn't be carried out and you could talk sense.
But just because it's not carried out and you could talk sense into him, doesn't that still mean that the threat is there?
No.
Okay. Now let's put this in context. If you're talking about anybody else, you'd think maybe at best it's idle chatter. But in the hands of a demented Donald Trump, who has a power-hungry drive to return to the White House, to retaliate and commit retribution and get revenge against what he perceives as his political enemies, and with an attorney general's office, a Department of Justice headed by one of his hand-picked bootlickers and lackeys, we have something to worry about. So let me just give you a backdrop of the federal death penalty and how that works. There's about 60 crimes that are on the books through Congress, in which if you violate those, if you're found guilty of those crimes, it could lead to you receiving capital punishment, the federal death penalty. It applies in all 50 states and all the territories of the United States. And that has, just to give you an example, there are about 60 or so federal death penalty inmates, criminal convicted inmates, felons who are on death row for federal crimes that could lead to capital punishment. Now, we have a sordid history with capital punishment in this country. There's always been a group of Supreme Court justices, including on the current bench, that believe it is automatically cruel and unusual punishment outlawed by the Constitution. The Constitution does not allow you to mete out as a society, in this country anyway, cruel and unusual punishment. Unfortunately, right-wing MAGA always finds that the death penalty is not a cruel or unusual punishment. And that's why, although the Supreme Court, as far back as 1972, ruled that the death penalty was cruel and unusual, they ruled that the death penalty as it was on the books was unconstitutional. Congress then reenacted, with bipartisan support, the death penalty back in the 80s, and then they were up and running. But that death row didn't necessarily mean that anybody was executed, hanged, shot, gassed, or lethal injection, or the like. Now, most of these inmates, almost all of them, are in Terre Haute, Indiana. Terre Haute, Indiana is where, for instance, Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, was executed. It's hot outside, and your nighttime bedroom temperature has a huge impact on your sleep quality. If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter the weather. So you get better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/legalaf to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code LegalAF at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/legalaf and use the code LegalAF to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/legalaf to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. So let me just give you the stats. From 1972 to 2001, even after the Supreme Court struck down the death penalty at that time, and until Congress reenacted it. So for that almost 30-year period, there were exactly 0 people who were executed by this country. 0, even though they were convicted of crimes that could give them the death penalty. From 2001 to 2003, we had 3 convicted felons, death row inmates who were executed. From 2003 until 2020, so now we're into the Trump era, there were exactly 0. So from, just to do the math there, from 1972 to 2020, there were a total of 3 people that were put to death in this country, 3 convicted criminals. Under Donald Trump, from 2020 to 2021, there were 13 death row inmates that were executed. 13. In the prior 50 years, there were 3. What does that tell you about Donald Trump's commitment to clearing house and clearing what he sees as a backlog of federal inmates on death row that should be put to death? And if he gets back into power, we will see an acceleration of the use of the death penalty. We'll see, if he gets Congress, more federal death penalty crimes being put on the books. And we will see Donald Trump look at the 60 or so death row inmates as inventory that he needs to clear. And we will see, during his restoration of his presidency, as I like to call it, if that were to happen, we will see. If you think 13 is a shocking number, wait till you see the number that's going to happen next. We're going to see 20, 30, 40, or perhaps all 60 death row inmates being put to death. So when Donald Trump talks about execution, that he thinks that he has mused about this out loud, that he thinks that there should be public televised hangings of drug dealers and other criminals, because that would put the, quote, fear of God into other criminals, right? Donald Trump watches dystopic sci-fi movies and thinks they're documentaries. That's the only way I can put this. You know, he watches like Running Man and other movies from the 80s and 90s and 2000s and watches The Purge and thinks, is that a documentary? Or is that a blueprint for my presidency and how I'm going to address violent crime and how I'm going to install that into our United States of America and our constitutional republic? What are the founding fathers thinking now? What are the framers of our Constitution thinking now? If they let a criminal, he is a criminal president back into the presidency, forget his finger on the button, the nuclear button. Forget his finger, his hand on the nuclear football. Think about a guy who thinks he can execute his political enemies. And then think about what his Department of Justice would look like. The reason right now there has not been, under Joe Biden, President Biden, any executions is because Merrick Garland, as the Department of Justice, has put federal death penalty and the use of it on a review that's going on for the length of the Biden administration to determine if it is being done and implemented properly, or does it verge into cruel and unusual punishment. And therefore, as a result, as a policy decision of the Biden administration, none of the 60 or so that are on death row for federal crimes have been put to death. Contrast that again with the 13 that were killed when Donald Trump. I am not trading in hyperbole here. Donald Trump gets back into office, all 60 will have a target on their back, and we will see potentially public executions, televised, public hangings, public firing squads. Again, another weird fetish of Donald Trump. He likes to talk about firing squads and ask people about them. That's been documented. Hangings and the public and the use of public execution. So we can't ignore or get Trump fatigue about all the crazy shit he says out loud and say, well, he would never do that. Well, that's not what Bill Barr, his former attorney general, who now says he's going to vote for him again. I don't know how you can vote for a guy that you thought was going to execute people. Donald Trump also threatened to execute General Milley, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because he didn't like comments that Mark Milley made while Donald Trump was in office. And he didn't like that Mark Milley, to try to save democracy and to save the world, made an instant contact with his Chinese general counterpart to let him know that don't worry, the generals have our hands between Donald Trump and Donald Trump's finger and the nuclear button. We won't start World War III. We'll let you know the generals are going to protect America. Okay? This isn't a civilian command control system. We had to have a general be the patriot and step in. Donald Trump didn't like that. He didn't like the stories about Mark Milley, that Mark Milley claimed, rightly so, that Donald Trump was interested in starting war against other countries. And that's how we got into Mar-a-Lago, him trying to show proof from the top secret classified documents that he purloined, that he kept, showing it to people, saying, it wasn't me, it was Mark Milley, it wasn't me, it was Mark Milley, look at this, look at that. Right, that's Mar-a-Lago prosecution. But he also threatened to execute Mark Milley. I want a hot take like this to be unsettling. I want it to be no smoke, no sunshine. We just have to talk about these hard things. We have to be able to have this conversation together right here on the MeidasTouch Network. And so we do it, and we bring it to you without, no holds barred, no pun intended, no censorship. Nobody tells me what to say on this network. We're building this network with our bare hands. It's completely independent. And the only way we can do it is with your investment of time and your free subscription to the MeidasTouch Network to help us get to 3 million free subscribers before the November election. Look how important the stakes are at election time. And then you can follow me if you like this kind of analysis. We do it every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time with a two-headed host situation we call Legal AF, the podcast. Wednesdays, it's Karen Friedman Agnifilo. Pardon me. I got all choked up during this hot take. Wednesdays, it's Karen Friedman Agnifilo and me. Saturdays, my co-founder, Ben Mycelis, and me. And then we're on a video, YouTube here, MeidasTouch, Legal AF. And then you can find us on all major podcast platforms. If you like these kind of hot takes, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment. Let's start a dialogue. It helps with the algorithms, and it signals to the algorithmic gods, what do you want to see on this network? And then you can pick me up on all things social media at MS Popok, and go over to playlists or contributors on the MeidasTouch YouTube and look for Michael Popok for my full body of work. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary, heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know, and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.